What do you do when the woman you've spent 10 years with suddenly becomes a stranger? At first, she loses confidence. Then, she loses interest. And then, you find out her new lifestyle includes more than just workouts. It includes another man. Betrayal cuts deep, but revenge is an art. What if, instead of a messy divorce, you could dismantle her perfect world piece by piece? What if you could turn her triumph into a nightmare and reduce her lover to a shadow of himself? This isn't just a story about infidelity. It's a story about cold calculation, patience, and retribution that strikes exactly where it hurts the most. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. My wife and I have been together for nearly 10 years, 5 of which we've spent as husband and wife. Our relationship began back in college, where we both focused on building our careers and increasing our earnings. However, shortly after our wedding, she started gaining weight. She had struggled with obesity before college and often expressed how it had made her feel inferior to other women. She had promised herself that she would never return to that state. Despite this, by the 3rd year of our marriage, she had put on 70 pounds. Her confidence plummeted, and the strain on her self-esteem inevitably affected our intimacy. Meanwhile, I remained consistent with my workouts, maintaining my weight through regular gym sessions. I frequently encouraged her to join me, but she always declined, uninterested in the heavy lifting environment of my gym. Once her weight gain reached 75 pounds over her pre-marriage weight, she finally resolved to make a change. Instead of accompanying me, she enrolled in a different gym, one that was more welcoming and catered primarily to women. The facility prioritized cardio-based activities, offering an array of treadmills, stationary bikes, and morning aerobics classes, which she started attending before work. Over the next year, she remained committed to her fitness regimen, shedding all the extra weight and more. As her body transformed, so did her confidence, and with that, our physical relationship improved. Another 6 months passed, and she had never looked better. She started getting spray tans, let her hair grow longer, and upgraded her wardrobe with stylish outfits. She was stunning. My attraction to her was stronger than ever, and I eagerly anticipated our time together. Yet, to my surprise, our intimacy started to dwindle. At first, it became infrequent, then nearly non-existent. When I questioned her about it, she dismissed my concerns, claiming she was too exhausted from her workouts and suggested I handle things myself. The first time she said that, it felt like a gut punch. Her response set off alarms in my mind. I found myself caught between blind trust and an unshakable suspicion that something was wrong. I wasn't the type to sit idle, hoping things would resolve themselves. If I was wrong, I would apologize and move forward. But if I did nothing, doubt would eat away at me, and life was already complicated enough. I decided to take action. I concealed a voice-activated recorder inside her purse lining and activated location tracking on her phone. The evidence was undeniable. She had developed a pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday morning, she wasn't just hitting the gym, she was meeting someone. Her destination was an apartment. The man she was seeing? Her trainer. His name was Derek. He was the typical fitness fanatic, obsessed with sculpting his body into perfection. His social media was a shrine to his physique, filled with gym selfies, race day photos, and flexing shots. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of pain. My emotions swung wildly between fury and heartbreak, leaving me in a constant state of turmoil. Desperate to regain control, I threw myself into my workouts, hitting the gym twice a day, once before work and again in the evening. I convinced myself that if I improved my physique enough, she might finally notice me again. But no matter how much muscle I gained, she remained oblivious, lost in her own world. She didn't acknowledge my transformation or recognize my pain. Forget her. Legally, a divorce would be simple. We rented our home, shared a modest bank account, and owned 2 cars of equal value. The only substantial asset was her 401k, as my job didn't offer one. Then, there was the question of payback. Logically, I knew the mature approach would be to walk away with my dignity intact, focus on rebuilding my life, and refuse to waste energy on revenge. But that wasn't enough. I needed closure, and to achieve that, I had to dismantle the fantasy world she had created for herself. Consider it my version of therapy, burning everything down so I would never be tempted to look back. The plan was straightforward. I would strip away the very thing that had brought them together, their fitness-driven lifestyle. Derek lived on the ground floor of an apartment complex, his unit facing the pool. I purchased a discreet surveillance camera disguised as a light fixture and installed it, ensuring a perfect view of his front door. What I uncovered surpassed my expectations. Derek wasn't just seeing my wife, he was juggling 3 other married women from the gym. None of them even removed their wedding rings. On top of that, he had a casual arrangement with a neighbor who frequently invited him over. He had a habit of leaving his door unlocked when he went to the pool. One day, when he slipped into his neighbor's apartment, I let myself in. I installed cameras in every room, swapping out his USB wall adapters for identical ones equipped with motion-activated surveillance. From that moment on, everything streamed directly to my computer. I also took extensive photos of his apartment, documenting every detail of his space. Over the following 2 weeks, I studied his routine. He definitely had a type, women dedicated to fitness. While my wife was beautiful, 2 of his other lovers were even more attractive despite being slightly older. The third woman, who was closer to my wife's age, carried some extra weight but appeared just as eager in her encounters with him. Their meetings followed a predictable script: light conversation, flirtation, and then straight to the bedroom. Derek carried himself with confidence, but there was nothing extraordinary about him. He was simply a man who understood how to exploit attraction and opportunity. All 3 women were paying him for training. The more conventionally attractive ones handed over $100 each, while the heavier woman paid twice that. My wife, however, wasn't paying a cent. This was just the beginning. She had some kind of arrangement with him, an ongoing exchange that wasn't difficult to notice. Not long after, I stumbled upon a vial filled with substances that, upon closer inspection, turned out to be human growth hormones. It soon became obvious. Loverboy had been dosing himself not just with HGH, but also other performance-enhancing drugs. On weekends, the neighbor would stop by his place, and the 2 would spend time together, deepening their connection. I told my wife I had an urgent business meeting in Los Angeles, but instead I rented a car and drove to Ciudad Juarez. My plan was simple: hire someone who could visit multiple doctors and secure several prescriptions for birth control pills under different names. When I explained my intentions to the woman I had hired, she offered a more efficient solution. She revealed she had a trusted connection, a pharmacist who could provide unlimited supplies of whatever was needed. According to her, plenty of women turned to him for various medications. I asked if he could supply the drug in an injectable form. She confirmed he could, though she warned it was primarily meant for veterinary use. Without hesitation, she called him and arranged the deal. I drove her to the pharmacy, where she introduced me to her contact. I stated what I wanted, handed over the money, and walked away with exactly what I needed. As compensation for her assistance, I paid her 4 times her daily rate. And yes, I accepted the full extent of her services. It had been nearly a year since I had been with anyone in that way. Meanwhile, Loverboy continued injecting himself with his secret supply. Using a spare key I had found during my first visit to his apartment, I carefully emptied his testosterone vials and replaced them with estrogen. When I returned home, I swapped out my wife's HGH with testosterone. It took almost 2 months before the changes became noticeable, first in my wife. Her physique shifted dramatically. Muscle definition became more pronounced, her body responding rapidly to the hormonal switch. Along with it came an increasing irritability, her patience wearing thin over minor inconveniences, her anger flaring up unexpectedly. She also began suffering from frequent breakouts. Casually, I suggested she try a different brand of tanning spray. Meanwhile, Loverboy's body was softening. I caught him stepping onto his bathroom scale, his frustration evident as he stared at the numbers. During my wife's routine visits, her personality had shifted. In response, Loverboy began increasing his doses, desperately trying to counteract what was happening. Eventually, my wife confided in him that the HGH he was supplying felt different, stronger perhaps. He reassured her that nothing had changed, though his own body betrayed him. He doubled down on his injections, trying to regain control. By the 4th month, his world was unraveling. His relationships, his lifestyle, even his connection with my wife, it all began to collapse. He could no longer keep up with the life he had built, and his enthusiasm drained away. My wife, meanwhile, became an unpredictable storm of rage and despair, swinging wildly between fury and deep regret. Eventually, Loverboy's situation reached a breaking point. A minor comment about his changing appearance sent him spiraling into a public breakdown at the gym. His employer had seen enough. He was fired on the spot. A passing remark had shattered him. A mutual acquaintance later informed me that, in his desperation, he sought comfort from my wife. He tried to confide in her, to find solace. But she wasn't interested. When he persisted, practically begging for her sympathy, she snapped, her fist striking him hard in the stomach. He crumpled, gasping for air, clutching his torso as tears welled in his eyes. She stood over him, her words dripping with venom. That was the final straw. Both of them were banned from the gym. Neither sought medical help, perhaps out of fear of revealing their prolonged drug use. But the damage was irreversible. Loverboy's transformation worsened, his body betraying him more each day. His hair thinned rapidly. Eventually, he had no choice but to see a doctor. Blood work confirmed severe hormonal imbalances. The medical team suspected thyroid dysfunction, which ultimately led to surgery. He would be on medication for the rest of his life. My wife, on the other hand, tried to find a fresh start at a new gym, but her motivation had all but vanished. Her body returned to its former shape, her hair thinning, her skin covered in an aggressive rash that spread across her back, chest, thighs, and face. She grew desperate for intimacy, pleading with me to touch her again. I refused, telling her I wouldn't go near her until I was sure her condition wasn't contagious. By that point, I had already spent months avoiding our bed. Eventually, she went to a doctor. The drugs had long since left her system. Her physician referred her to an allergist and prescribed medication to help manage her depression. She had never been at a lower point. The next morning, she discovered an envelope on the front seat of her car. Inside were a voice recorder, 2 photographs, and a note. One image captured her in an intimate moment with Derek. The second displayed her holding an illegal substance, the label clearly visible. The note was direct. "I know about your affair with Derek. I have video and audio proof. You need to leave $1,000 in $20 bills. If you don't, I will send the evidence to your husband and report the drugs to the authorities. More instructions to follow." From my place inside the house, I watched as she sat frozen in the driveway, listening to the audio. It played back not only her interactions with Derek, but also a moment where she openly ridiculed me, calling me pathetic. At first, her face reflected pure shock. Then, fury took over. She didn't hesitate. The car roared to life, and she sped off. Tracking her location through GPS, I saw exactly where she was heading, Derek's apartment. From the pool camera, I observed her as she pounded on his door. The moment he answered, she lunged at him, fists flying. Before he could react, she had already clawed at his face, leaving deep, angry scratches, and yanked a handful of his thinning hair straight from his scalp. He had little left to lose. From the microphones inside his apartment, I heard her voice, raw, furious, as she demanded answers. "Derek, what the hell is wrong with you?" My wife's eyes burned with fury as she glared at me, her lips curling in disdain. "You're trying to blackmail me, you miserable excuse for a man." Derek let out a sharp laugh, shaking his head. "Blackmail you? What nonsense are you spouting now?" She crossed her arms tightly. "If I don't get what I want, I'll spill everything to my husband. And I won't stop there. I'll tell the police all about your drug habit." Derek exhaled through his nose, frustration flickering in his gaze. Why would I do something so reckless? If this gets out, I'm the one who stands to lose the most. Her smirk deepened. "Oh, really? You don't even have a marriage to lose." Derek's expression darkened. "The drugs, that's the real problem. If anyone traces them back to me, I could be looking at serious prison time." Instead of answering, she reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded letter, extending it toward him. Derek skimmed the page, his eyes widening slightly. "Damn. I hate that you're going through this, but it's got nothing to do with me. Honestly, I was just about to leave town. I'm heading back to my parents' place until I can get my life together." He handed the letter back. That's when she really looked around the room for the first time. Most of his belongings were either packed or missing. And then she noticed him properly. His face was battered, both eyes swollen and bruised, his right leg encased in a cast. Her expression darkened. "What the hell happened to you?" Derek let out a humorless chuckle. "Your husband isn't the only one furious with me." Her brows knitted together. "What's that supposed to mean?" Derek averted his gaze. 3 other husbands. Their wives. Well, let's just say they weren't exactly faithful. She went rigid before letting out a strangled, enraged sound. "You cheated on me with 3 other women?" Derek looked down, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry." It was the worst thing he could have said. She lunged, grabbed the front of his shirt, and drove her fist into his face, the impact shattering his nose. Derek crumpled backward, blood dripping onto his upper lip. She towered over him, her fingers still clutching the remnants of his shirt. "You're worthless," she hissed. "And if I find out you had anything to do with this, you'll regret it." Derek stayed where he was, shaking as she stormed out. That evening, the moment my wife walked in, I knew something was wrong. Her posture was rigid, her expression a storm of barely contained rage. I didn't say a word. I had already left a note in her car with simple instructions. Put the money in a gym bag and leave it in the trunk while she worked out. When she returned to her vehicle, the bag was gone. In its place sat a disposable phone. The next day I called her, my voice masked by a distorter. "That was just a test. Now, I need you to cash out your 401k and hand everything over." She scoffed. "That's never going to happen." I chuckled. "Appreciate the 10 grand, though. Enjoy your divorce, your time behind bars, and your family finding out who you really are." She tried to negotiate, but I ended the call by sending her a video. That broke her. It took her a month to withdraw the full amount. When she finally did, I instructed her to place the cash in her husband's car while he was at the gym. I promised her this would be the last time she'd ever hear from me. Still, I tracked her movements and quickly realized she was tailing me. That evening, she parked a short distance away, her eyes locked onto my car. To throw her off, I purchased a large container of protein powder and asked a gym trainer to place it in my trunk. Then I went to work out. When I returned, she was standing beside my car, peering inside. The protein powder was still there. The cash? Gone. A few days later, I took her to an upscale restaurant for our anniversary, a place where men wore tailored suits and women dressed in elegance. We ordered drinks, and when they arrived, I slid a manila envelope across the table. She hesitated before picking it up. "What's this?" "Your divorce papers." Her hands trembled as she flipped it open. Inside were photographs, clear, indisputable proof of her affair. Her face paled. "Where did you get these?" I smirked, sipping my drink. "Someone left them on my car seat at the gym." Her eyes welled with tears. "I love you. We can fix this." I leaned forward, my voice even. You've been with him for almost a year. I know everything. How you plan to take everything and disappear with him." She reached across the table, desperate. "Please, I'll prove to you I can be the wife you deserve." I shook my head. "That's exactly what got us here. You lost weight, changed your attitude, and instead of valuing our marriage, you betrayed me. Now, you're back to being miserable, and I'm just supposed to forgive and forget." She sat frozen, the weight of my words crashing down on her. "You're a failure," I added icily. A flicker of recognition crossed her face. Those were her own words, ones she had thrown at me countless times before. Realization twisted into rage. She lost it. "You bastard! I'll kill you!" she screamed, throwing her drink at me. I dodged, but in doing so, nudged the table into her abdomen. She took it as a challenge and hurled her salad at me. Then, in a terrifying burst of anger, she grabbed a steak knife and lunged. The blade slashed through my jacket, barely missing skin. I stumbled back, and she struck again. A clumsy, furious overhand stab, easy to block. I caught her wrist just as two waiters rushed in. Together we restrained her as she shrieked and fought like a wild animal. When the police arrived, she was still seething. The second they released her, she sprang up, another knife clutched in her grip, one she had been lying on. They tased her before she could reach me. When questioned, I remained composed. I served her divorce papers after discovering her affair. She snapped. Fortunately, I started recording as soon as she began screaming. What I didn't mention was that I hit record right after calling her a failure. The officers reviewed the footage and asked for a copy. Between the video evidence and her violent outburst in the restaurant, it was more than enough to secure her conviction. And just like that, I was finally free. This story has come to an end. Every action has consequences, and lies will always come to light. Instead of valuing her relationship, the main character chose deception, while her lover thrived on manipulation. But revenge is never the answer. It only leads to more destruction. True strength lies not in payback, but in letting go, learning from the past, and moving forward. Respect, honesty, and sincerity are the foundations of real relationships. Without them, no amount of physical transformation or status can ever save what's already broken. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. He always swallowed his pride until tonight. It started as a normal family dinner, laughter, clinking glasses, warm conversations. But then she made him the joke again, just like always. The room filled with uneasy chuckles, stolen glances, and his silent humiliation. Only this time, something was different. His stare wasn't empty, it was steady, unshaken. Something had shifted. From this moment on, the game changed. "Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started." Thanksgiving was supposed to be an evening of gratitude, a time to sit among family, share a meal, and reflect on the blessings in our lives. As I took my place at the dinner table, surrounded by familiar faces, I had no reason to expect anything different. The night had unfolded pleasantly so far, filled with warm conversation, laughter, and the comforting clatter of silverware against plates. I was mid-conversation with my brother-in-law, when my wife's voice sliced through the hum of chatter, playful yet pointed. "Oh, please," she teased with a knowing smirk. "You should count yourself lucky. At least you have something interesting going on." I wish I could say the same about our bedroom. For a moment, the room froze. Then came the scattered, uneasy laughter, some genuine, others forced. A few guests shifted in their seats, suddenly preoccupied with their drinks, while others exchanged amused glances. The weight of her words settled over me, deliberate and sharp. She had turned me into the evening's entertainment, using my humiliation as the punchline to her joke. My face burned, but I willed myself to remain composed. I scanned the room, taking in the mix of amusement and discomfort. Some people avoided my gaze altogether, while others awaited my reaction with veiled anticipation. I could have responded right then, but to what end? A confrontation in front of everyone would only make things worse. Instead, I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and acted as though the remark had barely registered. Yet deep inside, something shifted. This wasn't a careless slip of the tongue. It wasn't an innocent joke. It was intentional. And worse, it wasn't the first time. I thought back to all the moments before this one, similar digs, not as blatant, but just enough to erode my dignity bit by bit. She never did it in private, always in front of an audience, whether it was family, friends, or even co-workers. It was a routine of hers, a way to diminish me while others looked on. And every time, I had let it pass. But tonight felt different. The evening carried on, but I no longer felt present. I laughed when it was expected, responded when necessary, but my mind was elsewhere. I observed her as she moved through the night with ease, acting as though nothing had happened, as though my embarrassment was just a fleeting joke she had already forgotten. When dinner ended and guests began gathering their things, I mechanically went through the motions, stacking plates, collecting empty glasses. She remained carefree, still engaged in conversation, unbothered by the moment that had unraveled earlier. It meant nothing to her. To me, it meant everything. As the last guest stepped out and the door shut behind them, the house fell into silence. The warmth of the gathering faded, leaving behind only the remnants of the evening, half-filled glasses, discarded napkins, the faint echoes of conversation still lingering in the air. Standing at the sink, I let the water run over my hands, my mind replaying the dinner table scene on a loop. I waited for her to acknowledge it, an apology, a simple recognition, but she said nothing. She entered the kitchen, humming lightly as she gathered dishes, utterly unfazed. I turned off the faucet, dried my hands, and finally broke the silence. "Did you really have to say that?" My voice was steady, measured. She barely spared me a glance. "Oh, come on. Don't be so dramatic. It was just a joke. Just a joke." I exhaled slowly, nodding. "Right. A joke. So, making me look like a fool in front of everyone, that's funny to you?" She rolled her eyes, setting the glasses in the sink. "No one cared. You're acting like I said something terrible." People laughed. It wasn't that big of a deal. I clenched my jaw, studying her indifference. No one cared? Maybe not. But I did. I could have argued, could have reminded her that this wasn't the first time, but I stopped myself. What was the point? She wasn't listening. She never listened. Instead, she poured herself a glass of wine, took a sip, and shrugged. "You always make a big deal out of nothing." There it was again. Her ability to twist the narrative, to make it seem like I was the one overreacting. For years, I had let it slide. The subtle insults, the dismissiveness, the way she brushed me off whenever I tried to express myself. But something about tonight was different. I didn't argue. I didn't try to make her understand. I simply watched her for a moment, then turned and walked out of the kitchen. Upstairs, I loosened my tie and sat on the edge of the bed. The house was still, but my thoughts weren't. Her words echoed in my mind, along with the realization of how effortlessly she had made me into a joke, so confident that I wouldn't push back. And for a long time, she had been right. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back at me looked exhausted, but there was something else in his eyes, a shift, a clarity, a quiet resolve. I wasn't going to let this go, not this time. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I made no effort to rouse her, nor did I glance in her direction as I dressed and quietly stepped out of the bedroom. There was no point in rehashing last night's argument. She had already made it crystal clear how little it meant to her. Skipping my usual routine of brewing coffee and scrolling through emails, I grabbed my keys and walked straight out the door. I didn't linger in the kitchen, didn't pause to check my phone. Instead, I drove directly to the gym, a place I hadn't set foot in for months, maybe even longer. Life had a way of pulling me away, drowning me in work, responsibilities, and a marriage where I felt more like an afterthought than a partner. But as I stood outside that building, a sudden realization struck me. I hadn't just neglected my body. I had let go of myself entirely. Determined to change that, I signed up for a membership and got to work. The first few sessions were brutal. My muscles screamed in protest, my breath faltered faster than I remembered, and every workout left me utterly exhausted. But I kept going. This wasn't just about getting in shape, it was about reclaiming control. Every drop of sweat, every burning repetition, it was proof that I was taking something back. Beyond the gym, I started making other changes, small ones at first. I swapped my worn-out jeans and loose-fitting t-shirts for clothes that actually fit. Instead of the usual quick trim, I visited a proper barber. I straightened my posture, became more aware of how I moved, how I carried myself. I didn't announce any of it. I wasn't doing it for her, but I noticed when she started to take notice. At first it was subtle, a longer glance when I walked through the door, a lingering gaze as I moved past her. She didn't say much, but there was a shift, something unspoken hanging between us. I didn't stop. I pushed harder at work, took on projects I once shied away from, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself of what I was capable of. I reconnected with old friends, made plans without waiting for her input, without checking if it fit into her schedule. For years, I had structured my life to accommodate hers. Not anymore. Now, I was living for me. One evening, after a workout, I walked into the kitchen to grab some water. She was at the table, phone in hand, but the moment she saw me, she set it down and tilted her head. "You've been going to the gym a lot lately." Her voice was casual, but something else lurked beneath it. I twisted off the cap of my water bottle and took a slow sip. "Yeah." She waited, expecting me to elaborate. When I didn't, she let out a forced laugh. "What brought that on?" Leaning against the counter, I shrugged. Felt like it was time for a change. For the first time in a long time, I saw something new in her expression. Uncertainty. I let the silence stretch between us before taking another sip and walking past her, leaving her sitting there, wondering what was coming next. In the weeks that followed, I stayed the course. I didn't slow down. I didn't offer explanations. I wasn't looking for her validation, and that, more than anything, unsettled her. She became more observant, her eyes following me when I walked through the door, stealing glances at my phone whenever it buzzed. She tossed out casual remarks about how I seemed different. But this wasn't an act. I was different. I wasn't waiting for her approval anymore. At first, she pretended it didn't faze her, but I could tell it did. One evening, as I was getting dressed to go out, something I rarely did without checking with her first, she leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. "Where are you going?" Her voice was neutral, but the tension in her posture gave her away. I fastened the last button on my shirt without looking up. "Out." "With who?" I reached for my watch and secured it around my wrist. "Some friends from work." She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "You never used to go out like this." I met her gaze in the mirror and nodded. "Yeah, I guess I didn't." Her lips pressed into a tight line. She wasn't used to this, to me being unpredictable, unavailable. She had always been the one in control, the one setting the terms. Now, the balance had shifted. A few nights later, as I sat on the couch responding to messages, she settled beside me. "You've been really busy lately." Her voice was softer than usual. I nodded. "Yeah." She hesitated, then spoke again. "You know, if something's wrong, you can talk to me." I almost laughed. Now, she wanted to talk. After years of dismissing my concerns, brushing off every attempt I made to tell her how I felt. Suddenly, she cared. Not because she had changed, but because she could sense it, something slipping through her fingers. I didn't fall for it. I didn't reassure her. I didn't pretend everything was fine. I simply met her eyes for a moment, then turned back to my phone. That silence spoke louder than any words could. After that, she started trying harder. Small gestures at first, cooking more often, bringing up memories from when we were happy, suggesting outings to places we hadn't visited in years. She acted as if we could slip back into the old routine, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed, because this time, I wasn't the one waiting. I had stopped playing the game. One evening, as we sat on the couch, she reached for my hand, something that hadn't happened in what felt like forever. I didn't pull away, but I didn't grip hers in return either. For the first time in ages, I wasn't the one chasing. After that night, her change in demeanor became glaringly obvious. She started making an effort, not out of love or genuine care, but out of fear. Fear of losing control, fear of no longer holding all the power. Suddenly, she was handing out compliments, something she hadn't bothered with in a long time. "You look good today," she said one morning, studying me like I was someone unfamiliar, someone she was trying to figure out. I acknowledged it with a nod. "Thanks." No excitement, no eagerness, just a neutral response. Her messages became more frequent. She wanted to know my plans, asked when I'd be home. Before, she hardly noticed when I worked late. Now, she was suddenly invested in my whereabouts. One evening, as I was tying my sneakers for the gym, she leaned against the doorway, watching me. "You've really stuck with this whole workout thing," she noted. I shrugged. "Yeah." She hesitated before asking, "Are you doing it for someone?" I paused, meeting her eyes. There was something different in her tone. Uncertainty, maybe even insecurity. It was written all over her face. She was trying to decipher whether I had moved on, if there was someone else. I let the silence linger before finally standing, grabbing my keys and saying, "I'm doing this for me." And that was the truth. She didn't like that answer. What she wanted was reassurance, something to anchor her, to restore her sense of control. But I wasn't offering that. After that, her efforts escalated. One evening, she cooked my favorite meal, something she hadn't done in years. The table was set, candles flickered, and she even poured my drink before I sat down. I took a bite. It tasted just as good as it always had, but I wasn't going to pretend that any of this changed anything. "This is nice," I said, my voice unreadable. Relief washed over her face. "I thought it would be. I know things have been off, but maybe we just need to spend more time together." I let her talk, let her explain how things could be fixed. But as her words continued, it became clear. This wasn't an apology. There was no acknowledgement of the part she had played in all of this. She wasn't trying to mend what had been broken. She just wanted to rewind, to return to how things used to be. And I had no interest in that. That night, she reached for my hand again. I allowed it, but I didn't hold on. Because I understood something she hadn't grasped yet. I wasn't the same man she had worn down over the years, and I had no intention of becoming him again. The shift between us was undeniable now. She felt it, just as I did. The difference was, I had come to terms with it. She was still resisting. She started planning spontaneous outings, dinner reservations, weekend trips, things that had never been priorities for her before. She was desperate to bring back a version of us where she had control. But that version of me no longer existed. One evening, she came home early to find me sitting in the living room, a book in my hands. She sat across from me, fidgeting slightly. "I was thinking," she began, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, "maybe we should go on a trip. Just the two of us. Get away for a bit." I closed the book and met her gaze. "Why now?" She forced a small smile and shrugged. "I just think we need it." Need it. I knew what she meant. She needed it. She needed to believe she could still pull me back in, that gestures like this could patch over the cracks. But I wasn't interested in pretending. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. Her smile wavered. "Why not?" I exhaled slowly, setting the book aside. "Because I'm done." The words hung heavy between us, immovable. She blinked as if trying to process them. "Done with what?" she asked, her voice quieter now. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Done with this. Done pretending that the past didn't matter. Done overlooking the way she had treated me for years. Done being someone she could disregard until it suited her to pull me back in. Her expression hardened. "So that's it? You're just walking away from us?" A quiet chuckle escaped me as I shook my head. "You walked away a long time ago. The only difference is, now I finally see it." She opened her mouth, as if ready to argue, but then shut it. Maybe she knew I was right. Maybe she was too tired to fight anymore. She sat there in silence for a long moment, before swallowing hard and nodding. "So what now?" I exhaled deeply as I pushed myself upright. It was time to move forward, and so I did. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of practicalities, sorting through the remnants of a life I was leaving behind, making arrangements, and reshaping my future without her in it. But the reality? I had been letting go long before our final conversation ever took place. The moment she humiliated me in front of everyone at Thanksgiving, something inside me cracked. From that day onward, every choice I made, every step I took, was a deliberate move toward something better. A life where I was no longer defined by her opinions. A life where, for the first time in years, I put myself first. So, if you're wondering what exactly happened on that infamous Thanksgiving, let me tell you, the divorce was an absolute storm. Lawyers, disputes, the exhausting process of dividing a life we had once shared. It unraveled exactly as you'd expect from a marriage that had already been disintegrating long before we had the courage to say it out loud. She didn't take it well. Initially, she wore a mask of indifference, pretending none of it mattered. But that illusion didn't last. The anger came next, the accusations, the sudden, desperate attempt to salvage what she had spent years dismantling. But by then, it was too late. The damage was beyond repair. Walking away was painful, but staying would have destroyed me. Now, I live on my own terms. No more censoring my words, no more carefully navigating someone else's emotional minefield, no more being the object of her contempt. I rebuilt myself, not for revenge, not to prove anything, but because I deserve a life beyond the one I left behind. So if you're sitting there, wondering if reclaiming your dignity is worth the struggle, let me tell you without a doubt, it absolutely is. This story has come to an end. Sometimes we get used to enduring, turning a blind eye, and justifying those who diminish us. But respect is not something you can beg for. It is either given or not. And if you are not respected, it's time to ask yourself, why are you tolerating this? This story is not about revenge, but about awakening. About how important it is to reclaim control, your worth, and your life. Your comfort, your confidence, your strength. They are in your hands. Don't let anyone take them away from you. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you liked this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you. Imagine waking up one day and realizing your entire life wasn't yours. Every choice, every habit, every decision you thought you made, it was all carefully crafted by someone else. Not out of love, but out of control. You weren't a partner, you were a project, a pet. And the worst part? You never even noticed. One overheard conversation changes everything, and suddenly the truth hits like a train. What would you do if you found out you'd been manipulated for years? Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If it's your first time here, don't forget to subscribe and like this video, as every like truly inspires me. Please tell me which city and country you watched this video from. Now, let's get started. That evening started like so many before it. My wife entertaining her friends in the living room, their laughter drifting through the house as I busied myself cleaning up in the kitchen. I hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but a remark about men being oblivious caught my ear. My wife's response hit me like a slap. "Oh, please, I don't deal with that. I have him trained like a dog." The eruption of laughter that followed left me rooted to the spot, her words echoing in my mind. She wasn't joking. She was proud. She went on, explaining how she had meticulously studied methods to manipulate a man's behavior, consuming books, articles, and online courses aimed at empowering women. But instead of using that knowledge to uplift herself, she had turned it into a tool, one she wielded expertly against me. "If I want him to stop doing something, I don't argue. I make him feel bad," she said, voice brimming with confidence. "I don't nag. I act disappointed, withdraw affection, let guilt do the work for me. And if I want him to do something, simple. Praise him, make him think it was his own idea. Works like a charm." The women cackled, seemingly unfazed by the sheer calculation behind her words. I clung to the desperate hope that it was a tasteless joke. But then she started listing examples, pointing out the hobbies I had abandoned, the social gatherings I'd stopped attending, even the foods I no longer ate, all because they didn't fit into her carefully curated life. She boasted about planting ideas in my mind, steering me in directions she preferred while allowing me the illusion of choice. When one of her friends asked if she ever felt guilty, she scoffed. "Guilty? Why would I? He has no idea. Marriage is a game. You either train them or they train you." My grip tightened on the countertop as memories surged. Moments I had once dismissed now made perfect sense. The countless times I had questioned why I'd given up something I enjoyed, only for her to brush it off. The way my routines had shifted without me noticing. The way every disagreement, no matter how small, ended with me apologizing, unsure of what I had even done wrong. I wasn't a husband. I was an experiment, a project she had successfully completed. The conversation moved on, but I couldn't focus on anything else. My ears rang as I stepped away, distancing myself not just from the kitchen, but from the illusion of our marriage. I needed space, air, anything to escape the suffocating realization that the woman I loved saw me as nothing more than a well-trained pet. One thing was certain, that control she wielded so easily, it ended now. The next morning, she carried on as if nothing had happened. She moved through the house, humming, smiling, handing me a list of things she wanted done as though our relationship was unchanged. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. I needed to understand just how deep this manipulation ran. So I started paying attention. At first, it was subtle. The way she phrased her requests to make it seem like I had already agreed. "Since you're going out anyway, could you grab a few things?" Even though I had no plans to leave. The calculated way she never raised her voice in disappointment, but instead let silence and disapproval work their magic, compelling me to adjust my behavior to avoid that feeling. I saw it clearly now. She had conditioned me. Digging further, I revisited old conversations, scrolling through messages I had once thought were harmless. Patterns emerged, phrases she used strategically to guide me without ever directly saying no. "It's fine. Do whatever makes you happy," always appeared when she disapproved of something, despite never outright forbidding it. And every time, without fail, I had backed down, eager to keep the peace. Then I saw the books. Our shelves were lined with self-help guides, relationship psychology texts, empowerment manifestos. I had never given them much thought before, but flipping through them now, I felt sick. They were filled with techniques on how to subtly control a partner, how to shape their choices without them realizing, how to reinforce behaviors with carefully placed rewards and punishments. And the worst part? I had followed their instructions to perfection, without even knowing it. As I traced the pieces of my life, I saw the full picture. When had I stopped playing my guitar? When had I begun isolating myself from friends? When had I started hesitating before making decisions, instinctively seeking her approval? This wasn't normal compromise. It was deliberate, orchestrated control. And it had worked. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was awake. For the first time in years, I wasn't just reacting. I was seeing. And once my eyes were open, I knew there was no closing them again. Now, the next move was mine. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I knew how that would go. She would twist my words, turn the situation around, make me question myself again. No, this wasn't a battle I could fight on her terms. But one thing was certain. I would never be trained again. She had a way of distorting reality, twisting events until she emerged as the wounded party while making me question my own perceptions. Whenever I challenged her, she would brush off my concerns, labeling me as paranoid or irrational. I refused to hand her that power again. Instead of engaging, I played the part she expected, acting as though nothing had changed. I met her subtle manipulations with the usual responses, mirroring what she wanted to see. But internally, I was watching, analyzing, keeping a silent record of every tactic she used to keep me under her influence. I began making quiet preparations of my own. The house was in both of our names, and I needed to understand where I stood legally. I reached out to a lawyer, not for a divorce just yet, but for insight into property laws, joint assets, and what my options would be if this all unraveled. I scrutinized our financial records, bank statements, credit history, shared expenses. She had always controlled most of it, but as I dug deeper, I realized just how much of my income had been siphoned into her personal luxuries rather than our mutual obligations. So, I made adjustments, rerouting a portion of my salary into a private account she wasn't aware of. It wasn't drastic, just enough to create a foundation for my independence. Simultaneously, I started reclaiming the parts of myself she had systematically erased: old friendships, hobbies I had neglected, aspects of my identity she had gradually stripped away. Reaching out to a friend from my past felt foreign at first, like stepping into a life I had unknowingly left behind. But as we talked, fragments of my former self began resurfacing. She took notice. "Why are you on your phone so much lately?" she asked one evening as I messaged an old friend. "Just catching up," I said, keeping my tone casual. "It's been a while." Her smile was tight, forced. "Oh, that's nice." She didn't push the issue then, but I saw the gears turning in her mind. A few days later, her behavior changed. Suddenly, she was unusually affectionate, lavishing me with praise, preparing my favorite meals. She played the role of the devoted wife flawlessly, but I wasn't fooled. This was a calculated maneuver, an attempt to reel me back in. I let her believe it was working while I continued putting my plans in place. I ensured I had copies of every critical document: our mortgage, insurance policies, car titles. I backed up messages, emails, anything that could serve as leverage. And once I had secured everything, I made my choice. I was severing the ties completely. Timing was crucial. If I acted too soon, she would manipulate the situation to her advantage. Every piece, legal, financial, emotional, had to be aligned perfectly. When I left, I wouldn't just walk away. I would walk away with the house, with the stability she had tried to deny me. My lawyer confirmed it. Based on the financial records and my documented contributions, my claim was solid. So, I waited, maintaining the illusion, allowing her to believe I was still under her thumb while finalizing every last detail to ensure I walked away with more than just my freedom. Then, one evening, I put the plan into motion. She arrived home, arms overflowing with shopping bags, purchases, as always, made with our shared funds. Barely acknowledging me, she was already lost in a phone conversation, bragging about her latest acquisitions. I remained seated at the dining table, waiting. When she finally glanced in my direction, she frowned. "What's with the look?" I placed a folder in front of me. This is over. Her lips twitched, but she quickly concealed it with a dismissive chuckle. Over? What are you talking about? I let the silence settle between us, allowing her to feel the weight of what was coming. Then, with measured calm, I clarified, this marriage. I know everything. For a fraction of a second, panic flickered in her eyes before she masked it with a hollow laugh. You're being ridiculous. I slid the folder across the table. Inside, she found it all: proof of my financial contributions, legal documents outlining my claims, records exposing her reckless spending, and, most damning of all, printouts of her own words, boasts in messages and social media posts detailing how she kept me under her control. Her fingers trembled slightly as she flipped through the pages, her movements becoming more frantic. Where did you get this? She demanded, her voice taut with unease. I've been paying attention. Her expression hardened. And what exactly do you think you're going to do with it? I already did it. That was when I revealed the truth. I had already filed the paperwork. The house was legally mine. The accounts had been separated. Every safeguard she had put in place to keep me tethered was gone. Her grip tightened around the folder before she snapped it shut. You can't do this to me. I already have. For the first time, she wasn't in control. She wasn't dictating the terms of the conversation. I was no longer reacting to her manipulations. I was leading, and she had no script to follow. Her voice wavered as she scrambled for a foothold, desperately trying to turn the situation to her advantage. We can fix this. You're just upset. Let's talk. I shook my head. I'm done talking. She studied my face, searching for any weakness, any crack in my resolve. She was looking for an opening, a way to maneuver me back into submission. But there was nothing left for her to latch onto. The game was over. But there was nothing. The person she had painstakingly shaped over the years had vanished, and for the first time, she grasped that reality. She sat frozen, her fingers clenching the folder so tightly that her knuckles paled. Her gaze flickered between the documents and my face, struggling to process the shift. This time, she wasn't the one pulling the strings. The silence between us thickened, pressing in from all sides. Then, as expected, the performance began. Her voice softened, adopting a carefully curated tenderness. I don't get it. Why are you doing this? She reached forward slightly, fingertips grazing the air as if trying to bridge the gap between us. I didn't move. The stillness, my refusal to engage, rattled her. She wasn't used to my silence. So she tried again, this time allowing her voice to waver just enough to imply sincerity. After everything we've been through, you're really going to throw it all away? Over some miscommunication? A miscommunication. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. I had laid out every fact, undeniable evidence in black and white, yet she still clung to the idea that she could warp the story, rearrange reality to make herself the victim. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the truth settle between us. Tell me, when was I supposed to notice that my life wasn't my own anymore? Before or after you conditioned me to follow your every demand? Her expression faltered. For the briefest moment, the mask slipped, revealing the raw emotion underneath. Anger, panic, the desperation of someone watching their control slip through their fingers. But she recovered swiftly, scoffing as she shook her head. Wow. You actually believe that? You're taking things way too literally. It was just talk, exaggeration, that's all. You're making this into something it's not. No, I said, my tone unwavering. I finally see things for what they are. Every decision I had thought was mine, every supposed choice I had made to alter myself. It had all been her doing. She had seized control, all while making me believe I was the one in charge. And the worst part? She had reveled in it. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. So now you're playing the victim? She snapped. Like I was some kind of evil mastermind pulling the strings and you were just some helpless pawn? Her voice grew sharp, each word slicing through the air. Give me a break. I did what any intelligent woman would do. I made sure I wasn't stuck with a man who made stupid choices. If you were weak enough to let me steer, that's on you. There it was. No illusions, no carefully constructed manipulations, just unfiltered disdain. I nodded, letting her words cement the final piece of clarity. That's all I needed to hear. She stilled. The moment the words escaped her lips, she knew she had said too much. Her eyes flicked toward the folder on the table, the reality of the situation sinking in. It was over, and she knew it. But giving up wasn't in her nature. Her voice dropped to something cold, something calculated. You really think you can just walk away? Take what's mine? It was never yours, I corrected. And yes, I can. It's already done. You can fight it, but you won't win. Her breathing turned uneven, hands curling into fists at her sides. You have no idea what you're setting into motion. I rose, meeting her gaze without hesitation. I know exactly what I'm doing. For years, she had orchestrated every move, dictated every outcome, controlled every detail. But that era was over. Now, she was the one grasping at nothing, while I was the one walking away. And she didn't handle it well. In the days that followed, she cycled through every strategy she had ever used against me. First, she pretended nothing had changed, slipping back into her usual role as though our confrontation had never taken place. She cooked my favorite meals, asked about my day, laughed at my jokes as if we were still a united front. When that failed, she leaned into guilt. One night, she appeared in the bedroom doorway, her voice quivering just enough to mimic authenticity. I gave you everything. I made you into the man you are. And this is how you repay me? I didn't respond. She had indeed shaped me, but not into the person I was meant to be. She had molded me into something that served her interests. When guilt proved ineffective, desperation took hold. She threatened to contest everything, to drag the legal battle through years of litigation just to make me suffer. But we both knew she had no case. I had been methodical, precise. Legally, it was already settled. The moment she realized she had no more moves left, the final shift occurred. The sweetness, the regret, the fury. It all drained away, leaving nothing but indifference. Fine, she said, regarding me with a detached stare. Take the damn house. But don't come crawling back when you realize you needed me all along. I didn't answer. I simply watched as she snatched her keys and stormed out. The door slammed shut, and just like that, she was gone. For the first time in years, the house stood in silence. I wandered through each room, absorbing the space that had once masqueraded as a home, but had truly been a prison designed just for me. Now, it was mine. Not just legally, fully, undeniably mine. Over the following weeks, I stripped away every last remnant of her influence, the furniture she had picked, the routines she had forced upon me, the unspoken rules she had imposed. Piece by piece, I reclaimed my life. I reshaped everything. The space around me became a reflection of my own vision, molded by my decisions and effort. It wasn't just about the home, it was about reclaiming control over my existence. I reconnected with people from my past, reignited passions I had once set aside, and, for the first time in ages, made choices that were entirely my own. No silent influence, no unseen hands steering me in directions I hadn't chosen. I was in command, and the feeling was electrifying. One morning, as I relaxed on my porch with a steaming cup of coffee, my phone screen lit up. Her name appeared. I didn't hesitate. Blocked. A sharp, decisive break, uncomplicated and final. She had spent years shaping me, twisting my identity to align with her expectations. But in the end, I was the one who stepped away, unbound. This story has come to an end, Manipulation isn't always shouting and orders. Sometimes it's soft words, subtle hints, and invisible boundaries shaping your reality until you lose yourself. True love is built on respect for freedom, not control disguised as care. If you find yourself changing, not because you want to, but because it's easier, stop and ask, who is really making the decisions in your life? Respect, trust, and freedom are the foundation of real relationships. Without them, love becomes a cage. Don't let anyone keep you on a leash. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.